Hey guys, tonight we begin with a place that promises to make you feel better, and somehow manages to do the exact opposite. The American hospital of the 1950s. Picture starched white sheets, gleaming tile floors, a nurse with a smile so crisp it could slice bread. And just underneath all that shine, a menu of treatments so alarming your modern doctor would faint backward into a filing cabinet. Before you get comfortable, a huge and genuine thank you to the listener who suggested tonight's topic. Your ideas are the whole reason this little corner of the internet keeps growing, and I really do read every single one. So take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you, because somehow it is always 2 a.m. somewhere. And if you would rather drift off without a single interruption, the channel is now on Spotify, with the link waiting in the description, along with a membership that unlocks a longer, completely ad-free version of every episode. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, fluff your pillow, and settle in. Let us wonder about a few things together. Have you ever been told that a nice long stay in bed will cure absolutely everything, including a broken bone and your entire personality? Ever wondered what it felt like to light a cigarette in your hospital bed while the doctor lit his own and nodded along in approval? Could you survive a week of mystery injections drawn from a glass syringe that has already visited 9 other patients before breakfast? Would you last 7 days on grey broth, ironclad visiting hours, and a physician who flatly refuses to tell you what is wrong with you, because he has decided you cannot handle it? And what exactly happens when the miracle cure of the week turns out to be mildly radioactive? Well, you are about to find out. Congratulations, you have just woken up in a hospital bed in the year 1954. Your gown is open in the back, your chart has a note that says the patient is not to be told, and someone down the hall is wheeling in a large machine that hums. Good luck. So you have arrived at the front desk, clutching your side and your dignity in roughly equal measure. Let us talk about being admitted. Because in the 1950s, walking into a hospital is a bit like checking into a very stern hotel that also owns your body for the foreseeable future. A woman in a starched cap looks at you over her spectacles, decides your fate in about 4 seconds, and hands you a clipboard thicker than the family Bible. There is no triage nurse gently asking about your pain on a scale of 1 to 10. There is a form, a fountain pen, and the unspoken understanding that from this moment on, you will be spoken about far more than you are spoken to. You lower yourself into a hard wooden chair and begin to write. Name, age, occupation, religion, next of kin, and a small forest of questions about relatives you have not thought about in years. The pen leaks, the chair creaks. Somewhere behind a frosted glass window, a telephone rings and rings while nobody answers it, because everybody is busy being important. You fill in every line as neatly as you can, aware that a single sloppy answer might follow you around the building like a bad smell. This paperwork is not a formality. It is your entire identity, condensed and filed. And from now on the file matters more than you do. Then comes the interview, if you can call it that. A clerk reads your answers back at you in a flat voice, correcting your spelling and raising an eyebrow at your handwriting. Your symptoms are noted in a shorthand you cannot follow. Your fear is not noted at all, because fear does not fit in any of the little boxes. You try to explain what actually brought you here, and you get a brisk nod and a reminder that the doctor will be the one to decide what is wrong with you. Your own opinion on your own body has just been politely filed under not required. If you are lucky, a porter appears with a wheelchair, and you're rolled down a long corridor that smells of floor wax, boiled linen, and something faintly medical underneath it all. If you're less lucky, you walk, clutching your paperwork like a passport into a country whose language you do not speak. Doors swing open and shut, Trolleys rattle past. A nurse calls out a name that is not yours, and 3 different people flinch. The whole building hums with a busy, echoing efficiency that makes you feel less like a guest and more like a parcel being sorted. At last, you reach the desk of the ward, where a second, even more senior woman in an even crisper cap inspects your file, inspects you, and finds you roughly equal to the task of lying down. A paper band is fastened around your wrist with your name written on it in careful ink, and just like that the transformation is complete. You have been converted from a person into a patient, which in this era is a subtly different and far more helpless category of human being. You no longer decide when you eat, when you sleep, or when you may stand up. You have traded all of that away for a bed and a promise of care, and you signed for it in triplicate without reading the fine print. So take one last breath as a free citizen, because your independence has now been checked at the door, right beside your clothes. Let us go and see exactly where you will be spending the week. Let us talk about where you will actually be sleeping. Forget the private room with a door and a television. You are being wheeled into the open ward, a long echoing hall lined with iron beds in 2 tidy rows, each one holding a stranger in some fascinating stage of misery. To your left, a man is coughing in a way that feels rehearsed. To your right, someone is quietly weeping into standard issue linen. There are no curtains worth the name, only a thin screen that a nurse drags over on wheels when something truly private is about to happen, which somehow makes it worse. The ward stretches on for what feels like a city block. 20 beds, maybe 30, all identical, all occupied, all facing each other across a wide central aisle of gleaming floor. High windows let in a pale wash of daylight, and absolutely no privacy. Every sound travels, every cough, every snore, every murmured prayer bounces off the hard surfaces and lands in your ear whether you invited it or not. You're about to learn more about total strangers than you know about some of your own relatives, and there is nothing you can do about it except lie there and absorb it. Your bed is assigned to you with the finality of a court sentence. It is narrow, high off the ground, and dressed in sheets tucked so tightly that climbing in feels like breaking into a very disappointing envelope. You wriggle beneath the covers and immediately understand that you have joined a community, one you did not apply to and cannot leave. Across the aisle, an elderly gentleman raises a hand in greeting. 2 beds down, someone is already asking the nurse when supper is. You have become a resident of a small, strange village, where everyone is unwell and nobody gets to go home. Personal space, that quiet modern luxury, is now a fond memory. Your neighbours will hear you receive bad news. You will hear theirs. When the man beside you is examined, you will learn the intimate geography of his complaint in exhaustive detail, delivered at full volume because the doctor sees no reason to lower his voice. When your turn comes, the whole ward will lean in, not out of rudeness, but out of the simple boredom of people who have nowhere else to point their attention. Privacy here is a rumour, whispered about but never actually seen. There are small mercies. A friendly word from the next bed can carry you through a long afternoon. The old hands of the ward, the ones who have been here for weeks, will teach you the rhythms of the place. When the tea comes, which nurse is kindest, how to catch a nap between interruptions. A strange fellowship grows among people who have been thrown together by bad luck and boiled sheets. You share the ceiling, the clock, and the collective groan when the supper trolley reveals its contents. Misery, it turns out, is a little more bearable when it is loud and communal. But make no mistake, the open ward is not restful. It is a stage where every patient performs their recovery in front of a captive audience, day and night, under the same flat light. You will learn everyone's ailments, everyone's snores, and everyone's opinions on the soup, all whether you like it or not. Sleep will come in stolen fragments, chased away by footsteps and clanging trolleys. So settle in and get comfortable in your narrow iron bed, because you are about to become extremely well acquainted with it. It is time to lie down, and here is the wildest part. You may not get up again for weeks. In the 1950s, bed rest is not a suggestion. It is the treatment, the philosophy, and very nearly the religion of the entire building. Broken your leg? Bed rest. Had a baby? 2 weeks flat on your back? Feeling a bit low? Into the bed with you. Recovering from surgery. Do not even think about wiggling a toe until a man in a white coat gives you written permission. Doctors of this era treat movement the way a cat treats a bath, and so you will lie there, staring at the ceiling, growing weaker by the hour, while everyone congratulates you on how well you're resting. The logic seems sound at first. Your body is unwell, so surely the kindest thing is to spare it all effort, to let it pour every ounce of energy into healing. So you are ordered to be still, gloriously, completely, relentlessly still. Getting out of bed is discouraged. Walking to the bathroom may be forbidden entirely, replaced by a bedpan and a burning sense of injustice. You are propped, plumped, and positioned, and then instructed to do absolutely nothing with the grim dedication of a professional. Doing nothing, it turns out, is exhausting. By the second day, the ceiling has become your entire world. You have counted the cracks in the plaster, named the water stains, and developed strong opinions about the light fixture. Time stretches and warps. An hour can feel like an afternoon. The clock at the end of the ward seems to tick more slowly out of sheer spite. You would give a week of your life for a brisk walk around the block, and yet a brisk walk around the block is precisely the one thing you are not allowed to have. Your legs twitch with unspent energy, while the rest of you slowly turns to pudding. And here is the cruel secret that nobody in the room has quite worked out yet. All this heroic stillness is not actually helping as much as everyone believes. Muscles that go unused begin to waste away. Joints stiffen. The blood, which rather likes to keep moving, grows sluggish and prone to trouble. Lungs held too still can gather fluid. The body was built to move, and asking it to lie perfectly flat for weeks is a bit like leaving a car in the driveway for a year, and then being surprised it will not start. The rest that was meant to cure you is quietly making you frailer. But try telling that to the ward. Bed rest is gospel here, and questioning gospel is not a patient's place. When the doctor makes his rounds and finds you lying obediently flat, he nods with deep approval, as though you have accomplished something remarkable by managing to stay horizontal. Nurses praise your stillness. Your chart records your excellent compliance. You are, by every measure the era respects, an ideal patient, which is to say you have not moved a meaningful muscle in days and everyone thinks this is going splendidly, so you sink back into the pillow and surrender to the tyranny of rest. You will lie here through breakfast, through the long empty middle of the day, through the endless evening, marinating in stillness like a very patient roast. Somewhere in the future, medicine will discover that getting patients up and moving speeds recovery enormously, and hospitals will start hustling people onto their feet the very next morning. But that revelation has not arrived, and so for now, your job is to lie down and think about it. Now, since you will be spending so very much time in that bed, let us take a proper look at what you're wearing. Let us address what you are wearing, because it is a crime. The hospital gown of this era is a thin cotton sheet with strings, an item that appears to have been designed by someone who'd heard about clothing but never actually seen it. It ties at the back, or rather it pretends to tie at the back, leaving you exposed to every draft, every visitor, and every ounce of your own crumbling self-esteem. There is no cozy robe, no dignity flap, no second gown to wear as a cape, because a resourceful patient has not yet invented that trick. Consider the design, if you can call it a design. The fabric is so thin you could read a newspaper through it, worn soft and faintly grey by hundreds of boilings before it ever reached your bed. It is cut generously in all the wrong places and stingily in the one place that matters. The strings, and there are never enough of them, are positioned so that no human arm can reach all of them at once. You tie the top one, twist to reach the bottom one, lose the top one, and begin the entire hopeless ceremony again while a nurse waits with the patience of a woman who has watched this exact struggle 1,000 times. Then there is the temperature situation. The ward is drafty in the way only large old buildings can be, and your gown offers roughly the protection of a light suggestion. Cold air finds you constantly, sliding up the open back like an unwelcome hand, settling into your spine, reminding you at every moment exactly how much of yourself is on public display. You pull the thin blanket higher, you clamp your elbows to your sides, you develop a permanent hunch, a defensive curl designed to keep the worst of the breeze off the parts of you that were never meant to meet a breeze in the first place. The real test comes when you must leave the bed. Perhaps you are wheeled off for an examination, or permitted as a rare treat to shuffle to the bathroom under supervision. This is where the gown reveals its true villainy. You rise, and the fabric parts behind you like a theatre curtain at the worst possible moment. You reach back with one desperate hand to hold it closed, which means you now have exactly one hand for everything else, including balance, doors, and your last shred of composure. You shuffle down the aisle, clutching the fabric shut like a Roman senator who has lost a bet, past rows of neighbours who have all made this same undignified journey and know exactly how it feels. You would think in a building full of clever people, someone might solve this. But the gown is not really designed for your comfort. It is designed for the staff, for quick access, for easy changing, for the convenience of everyone in the room, except the one person actually wearing it. Your dignity was simply not a factor in the specifications, and so you accept it. Because acceptance is the only garment that actually fits you in here. You are a patient now, and patients wear the sheet with the strings. And that is that. By the end of the week, you will have made a strange peace with it. You will have mastered the one-handed clutch, the careful reverse into the chair, the art of keeping the back closed through sheer will. The gown will have won, as it always does, and you will hand it back at discharge with the complicated feelings of a soldier returning a rifle. Somehow this flimsy little sheet becomes the uniform of your total surrender, and you wore it for 7 whole days. Now that you are dressed, in the loosest possible sense, let us meet the women who run this entire operation. Now let us meet the nurses, the beating heart of the ward and also its strictest border patrol. These women work brutal hours for little pay and even less credit, and many of them are genuinely angels in sensible shoes. But the system around them is rigid to the point of comedy. There is a spotless uniform, a starched cap that signals exactly which school she trained at, and a chain of command so strict that a junior nurse would sooner walk into the sea than question the head matron. Beds must be made with hospital corners sharp enough to injure a visitor. Charts must be perfect. Shoes must squeak in the correct manner. The uniform alone tells a whole story. The dress is pressed to a knife edge, the apron blindingly white, the cap folded into a precise shape that took years of practice to master and one careless gust of wind to ruin. Every pin is in its place. Every hem is the regulation length. A nurse can be inspected head to toe at any moment, and often is, and a smudge or a loose thread is treated as a small moral failing. These women present themselves each morning as spotless as the ward they command, because in this era, looking immaculate is considered proof that you are doing the job properly, whether or not the two things have anything to do with each other. The hierarchy is where things get truly serious. At the top sits the matron, a figure of near mythical authority whose approval is rare and whose displeasure is weather. Beneath her, the sisters who run each ward with military precision. Beneath them, the staff nurses. Beneath them, the students who scurry about doing the hardest and least glamorous work while absorbing a steady rain of correction. Rank is everything. A junior does not speak out of turn, does not question an order, and certainly does not offer an opinion unless one has been specifically requested, which it almost never is. The whole structure runs on obedience flowing downhill and blame flowing right back up it. For you, the patient, all this order has its upside. Your bed will be made with terrifying competence. Your medicines will arrive precisely on schedule. The ward will be cleaned, the floors will gleam, and the routine will click along like a well-oiled machine, because a machine is very nearly what it has been built to be. There is comfort in that reliability. When you are frightened and far from home, the sight of a calm nurse moving briskly through her rounds, everything exactly where it should be, can be its own quiet reassurance. Somebody, at least, knows what is happening, even if they will not tell you what it is. But the rigidity has teeth. Rules are followed because they are rules, not always because they help. Visiting hours are enforced to the minute. Lights go out on a strict schedule whether you're ready to sleep or not. A kind nurse who might bend a rule for a suffering patient risks the wrath of the entire chain above her, and so the kindness stays quiet, tucked into a gentle word or an extra blanket smuggled in when no senior is watching. The warmth is real. It simply has to survive inside a system that does not always leave much room for it. And so you learn to read them, these women in their perfect caps. You learn which one will slow down for a moment to explain something, which one will pretend not to notice you are awake past lights out, which one keeps the ward running through sheer force of will. They are overworked, underappreciated, and holding the whole place together with their bare and endlessly scrubbed hands. But there is one figure even the matron straightens up for, and you can hear the whole ward change the moment he arrives. Let us go and meet the doctor. Speaking of royalty, let us talk about the doctor. In the 1950s, the physician is not merely an expert. He is an oracle, a monarch, and a walking pronouncement, usually male, usually certain, and almost never questioned. When he sweeps onto the ward, a hush falls, nurses part like a curtain, and you are expected to feel grateful he has noticed you at all. He speaks about you in the third person, while standing directly beside your bed, discussing your insides with a cluster of students, as though you were a slightly interesting weather system. You hear him before you see him. A change moves through the ward like a pressure drop before a storm. Nurses stand a little straighter, charts are snatched up and squared away. The chatter dies. Then the doors swing wide and in he comes, coat crisp and white, trailing a respectful comet tail of junior doctors and wide-eyed students who hang on his every syllable. He does not walk so much as process, pausing at each bed to deliver his verdict before sailing on to the next. You have the distinct sense of being visited by a very busy king who has graciously agreed to tour the peasants. At your bedside, the performance begins. He lifts your chart, frowns at it thoughtfully, and then, still holding it, begins to describe your case to the students as if you were a diagram on a wall rather than a frightened human being lying 18 inches away. He gestures at the relevant part of you. He asks the students questions and lets them answer, correcting them with a dry little smile. Your body has become a teaching aid, and you have not been introduced. Occasionally he addresses a remark to you directly, usually a brisk instruction, and you answer with the eager politeness of someone who has been granted a royal audience. Questions from you are not exactly forbidden, but they are certainly not encouraged. Ask what is wrong, and you may get a vague and soothing phrase designed to close the subject rather than open it. Ask what the treatment will do, and you may be told, kindly but firmly, that this is not something you need to trouble yourself about. The doctor knows. The doctor has decided. Your role is to trust and comply, and the entire architecture of the ward, from the matron down to the last student, is built to reinforce that arrangement. Second opinions are not a habit here. There's nowhere to seek one and no polite way to ask. The strange thing is that much of this confidence is earned. These are, by and large, dedicated and highly trained men who have given their lives to medicine, and who genuinely mean to heal you. Their certainty comes from real skill and real knowledge, and in an age before patients could look anything up for themselves, that certainty was a kind of anchor. When the doctor pronounced that you would recover, the whole ward believed it, and belief, as it turns out, is not nothing when you're lying scared in an iron bed. But the pedestal has a cost. A doctor who is never questioned is also a doctor who is never checked, and certainty untroubled by doubt can carry a person confidently in the wrong direction. Mistakes made from the top of a pedestal are very hard for anyone below to point out. You lie there and place your entire trust in a man whose word is law, hoping the law is right, because you have been given no tools to know otherwise. And there is one thing this all-knowing figure may know that he has quietly decided you must not. Let us talk about the diagnosis nobody will tell you. Here is a detail that will make your modern skin crawl. In this era, the doctor may know exactly what is wrong with you and simply decide not to mention it. Withholding a serious diagnosis, especially something frightening, is considered not cruelty but kindness, a way of protecting your delicate spirit from bad news. Your family might be told the full truth in a quiet hallway, while you lie in bed inventing your own theories. A grim word could be spelled out on your chart in Latin precisely so you cannot read it. You're the main character of your own illness, and also the last person invited to the discussion. It sounds unthinkable now, and yet at the time it was simply good manners. The prevailing wisdom held that a frightening diagnosis could do a patient more harm than the disease itself, sapping the will to fight, crushing hope, hurrying the very decline everyone dreaded. And so a protective silence settled over the worst news. The doctor would speak to your husband or your wife or your grown children in low tones by the window, and they would nod and dab their eyes, and then return to your bedside wearing carefully cheerful faces and telling you that everything was coming along nicely. So you lie there in a peculiar fog. You know you feel unwell. You can see the worried glances that people rearrange into smiles the moment you look their way. You notice that certain questions produce vague answers, and that certain words are never used in front of you. The information you most desperately want, the plain truth about your own body, is the one thing the entire building has agreed to keep just out of your reach. You become an amateur detective in your own case, reading faces, weighing pauses, trying to assemble the truth from the shape of the silence around it. The tools of concealment are everywhere once you know to look for them. The chart hangs at the foot of the bed in handwriting you cannot decipher, its most important words disguised in medical Latin like a secret code. Conversations shift to bright and empty topics the instant you tune in. Even the kindest nurse, who might long to tell you plainly, is bound by the doctor's decision and the iron chain of command above her. Everyone is being gentle with you, and the gentleness is its own kind of loneliness, a soft wall that keeps you sealed away from your own life. There is, to be fair, a real tenderness buried in all of it. The people doing this are not villains. They are following the best thinking of their day, and that thinking sincerely believed that hope was medicine, and that a shielded patient was a stronger one. Families kept these secrets out of love, carrying a terrible weight so that you would not have to. In a world with fewer treatments and blunter tools, protecting a person's spirit sometimes felt like the only care left to give. The intention was mercy, even when the result was a strange and aching isolation. But the cost is heavy, and later generations will come to see it clearly. A person kept in the dark cannot make choices about their own remaining time. They cannot put their affairs in order, or say the things that need saying, or decide for themselves how they wish to face what is coming. The idea that a patient has a right to the truth about their own body, plainly told, is a revolution still waiting in the wings. For now, you must lie here and guess, surrounded by kind faces that know more about you than you're permitted to know yourself. And where is all this hidden knowledge written down? Let us take a closer look at that mysterious clipboard just out of your reach. Let us examine that mysterious clipboard hanging just out of your reach. The chart is where your entire existence is now recorded in cramped handwriting, tidy little numbers and abbreviations that mean nothing to you and everything to them. Temperature, pulse, the colour of things best left undescribed, all noted with the calm efficiency of a shopkeeper counting stock. You're desperate to sneak a look at it, and you never quite can, because the moment you reach for it, a nurse materialises as if summoned by a bell. It hangs there on its metal hook, mere inches beyond your fingertips, taunting you. All day long, people you've never met approach the foot of your bed, lift the board, study it with serious expressions, jot something down, and hang it back up without a word to you. You crane your neck, you squint. You catch a glimpse of a rising line on a graph or a cluster of letters, and try to decode what it might mean for your future. It is like watching a group of strangers read your diary in shifts, while you are forbidden to open it yourself. The language of the chart is a fortress. The handwriting is the famously terrible scrawl of busy medical men, looping and hurried and half-legible even to those trained to read it. The abbreviations are a private code, whole sentences compressed into 3 or 4 letters that the staff understand instantly and you cannot begin to guess at. Numbers march down the page in columns, tracking parts of you that you did not know were being counted. Everything about it is designed for speed and for the people who write in it, and absolutely nothing about it is designed to be understood by the person it describes. And yet that chart is the truest portrait of you in the entire building. It knows your temperature at 3 in the morning when you were asleep and did not feel the thermometer. It records every dose of every medicine, every meal you managed, every restless night. It carries the doctor's private notes, his suspicions and conclusions, perhaps the very diagnosis that nobody will say out loud. In those cramped lines lives the version of you the hospital actually acts upon, and it may not match the reassuring version being spoken aloud at your bedside at all. The gap between the two is exactly where your unease lives. The nurses guard it with a devotion that would impress a dragon. Reach for it, and one appears at your elbow, gently but immovably steering your hand away. It is not personal. The chart is a working document, a tool of the trade, and letting patients pore at it is simply not how things are done. There is also, unspoken, the matter of what you might read there and how it might upset you, which loops us right back to all the truths the era prefers to keep politely folded away. The clipboard is not just a record, it is a small locked door, and you are on the wrong side of it. So you make do with what you can gather. You learn to read the nurse's face as she updates it, hunting for a flicker of good news or bad. You count how long the doctor lingers over it. You treat every raised eyebrow and thoughtful hum as a clue in a mystery about your own body. It is an exhausting way to be sick, forever reaching for a document that holds all your answers and forever being pulled gently back. But some of what fills that chart comes from a procedure repeated at your bedside several times a day, and it involves a piece of equipment you're about to become far too familiar with. Let us talk about the needle. It is time for your injection. Try to stay calm. In the 1950s, the syringe is a heavy glass and metal contraption, and here is the charming part. It is reusable. So is the needle. Both get boiled, wiped, and sent back out to work like loyal little soldiers, and a busy nurse might carry one from bed to bed with a briskness that would give a modern infection control officer a heart event. Needles are sharpened by hand when they go dull, which means yours may have the edge of a garden trowel. Let us appreciate the object itself. This is not the light disposable syringe of later years, used once and dropped into a bin. This is a substantial instrument of glass and steel, cleaned and cared for and used again and again and again. It lives in a tray, gets boiled between shifts, and is treated as permanent equipment rather than something you throw away. In an era of thrift, wasting a perfectly good needle would seem faintly ridiculous, so the needle earns its keep day after day, patient after patient, a hard-working little veteran of the ward. The sharpening is where things get truly memorable. A needle used many times grows dull, and a dull needle is a hooked and clumsy thing, so someone wets the point by hand to restore its bite. The results vary. On a good day, the tip is keen and the jab is quick. On a less good day, the point has the finesse of a nail, and the injection becomes an event you will describe to relatives for years. You watch the nurse approach, tray in hand, and you clench every muscle you have, which does not help in the slightest but feels like doing something. Now for the part that will genuinely raise your modern hair. The same syringe, sometimes the very same needle, travels along the row of beds, pausing at each patient in turn. A wipe, a fresh vial, and on to the next. Germ theory absolutely exists by now, and the staff do sterilize their equipment by boiling, and they truly believe they are being careful. But the deep, obsessive, single-use caution of later decades has not yet arrived, and the understanding of exactly how infection can hitch a ride from one person to another on shared equipment is still catching up. Things can pass down that row of beds that nobody in the room intends to send. For you, in the moment, none of this is the point. The point is that a large sharpened needle is heading toward your arm, held by a woman who does this 40 times a day and is not remotely nervous about it, which is somehow both comforting and alarming. You're told to relax the arm. You do not relax the arm. She finds her spot, and there is a firm pressure, and then a deep spreading ache that announces the medicine has arrived. You exhale. You have survived it. And you know with grim certainty that another one is coming in a few hours. The medicine itself might be doing you real good, and the nurse wielding the needle is genuinely trying to heal you with the best tools her era can offer. But the reused, resharpened, ward-roaming syringe is one of those details that later medicine will look back on with a shudder, quietly grateful for the invention of throwing things away. For now, it is simply part of the daily rhythm, as ordinary as the tea trolley and considerably less welcome. Speaking of things that visit your bed on a relentless schedule, let's talk about the small glass tube that arrives every few hours to take your temperature. Every few hours, day and night, someone will arrive to take your temperature, and the thermometer is a slim glass tube of mercury that goes exactly where you fear it might. It is rinsed, shaken down with a flick of the wrist, and passed along to the next patient with a speed that suggests nobody has thought too hard about the journey it has taken. Your pulse is counted by a nurse holding your wrist and squinting at a watch. Your blood pressure, if measured at all, comes from a cuff and a stern expression. Consider the humble thermometer, the ward's most tireless traveller. It is a delicate wand of glass with a thread of silvery mercury inside, and it must be held in place for a good long while to coax out an accurate reading, which means you lie there in enforced stillness, feeling faintly ridiculous. When your time is up, the nurse retrieves it, holds it to the light, reads the tiny line, and records the number on your ever-hungry chart. Then comes the rinse, the brisk shake, to send the mercury back down, and the handoff to the very next patient, the same little tube making its patient rounds up and down the row. The pulse is a beautifully human affair. No machine, no glowing display, just a nurse's cool fingers pressed to your wrist and her eyes fixed on the second hand of a watch pinned to her apron. She counts in silence, her lips barely moving, and you find yourself holding your breath as if you might throw off the tally. In 15 or 30 seconds she has your heartbeat measured, does a small sum in her head, and moves on. It is an old skill, quietly impressive, and it depends entirely on her attention and her arithmetic, rather than any beeped box. What strikes you most, once you get used to it, is the silence. There are no monitors here, no gentle electronic chirp reassuring the room that hearts are beating and lungs are filling. There is no screen above your bed tracing glowing lines through the night. If something in your body begins to go wrong between checks, there is no alarm to catch it, only the next scheduled visit from a nurse with her watch and her thermometer. Your safety rests on the rounds being kept and the eyes being sharp, on human vigilance rather than tireless machinery. Which brings us to the great indignity of the 3 a.m. check. You will finally blessedly have drifted off, chasing a few precious hours of real sleep, when a soft footstep and a cool hand rouse you back to the surface. It is time for your temperature. You blink into the dim ward light, submit to the little glass tube, offer up your wrist, and are told, in a kind whisper, that you're doing just fine and may go back to sleep now, which you cannot, of course, because you're now wide awake and mildly outraged, staring at the ceiling and composing complaints you will never deliver. And yet, there is something almost tender in all of it. Someone is counting your heartbeats through the night. Someone is walking the quiet ward with a watch and a notebook, checking on each sleeping stranger in turn, making sure the numbers hold steady until morning. It is care delivered entirely by hand, without a single machine to help, resting on the steady attention of tired women in perfect caps. Primitive, yes, and shared in ways that would horrify a modern eye, but human right down to the fingertips. So there you have it, the daily rhythm of measurement that fills your chart and interrupts your sleep. Now that you're thoroughly poked, counted, and recorded, let us turn to something you will come to dread 3 times a day. Let us talk about the food. Let us talk about meal times, because your recovery apparently depends on eating things that have personally given up. The 1950s hospital tray is a monument to the boiled, the beige, and the aggressively bland. There is broth the colour of dishwater, a scoop of something that might once have been a vegetable, a slice of white bread, and a wobbling square of gelatin standing in for dessert, joy, and hope all at once. Flavour is viewed with deep suspicion, as though a pinch of pepper might undo the surgery. The trolley arrives with a rattle you learn to recognise from 3 beds away, and the whole ward turns toward it with the guarded hope of people who know better and cannot help themselves. Metal covers are lifted one by one, releasing a faint steam and a smell that lands somewhere between a school cafeteria and a laundry. Beneath each cover waits the same careful arrangement of soft, pale, unthreatening food, portioned with a nurse's precision and seasoned with nothing at all. You're meant to find this comforting. Mostly you find it educational, a lesson in how much a person can miss a simple onion. There is a philosophy behind the blandness, and it is sincere. The thinking holds that an ailing stomach wants nothing challenging, that spice and richness are burdens on a body trying to heal, and that plain, soft, boiled food is the gentlest thing you can offer a patient. So the kitchen boils with conviction. Meat is stewed into surrender. Vegetables are cooked until they forget they were ever vegetables. Everything is made easy to chew, easy to swallow, and easy to forget the moment it is gone. Nourishment, not pleasure, is the entire goal, and pleasure was not invited to the planning meeting. If you are placed on a special diet, and many patients are, the tray grows even more austere. Salt may be forbidden, fat may be forbidden. Whole categories of flavour vanish in the name of your recovery, leaving you with a landscape of white and pale yellow, a still life in surrender. You poke at it. You rearrange it. You eat the gelatin first because the gelatin, whatever else may be said about it, at least commits to being something, quivering there in cheerful defiance of the beige around it. Eating itself becomes a small ordeal thanks to the bed. You are propped upright at an angle designed by someone who has never actually tried to eat lying down, balancing a tray on a wheeled table that swings just out of reach the moment you lean forward. Soup is an act of engineering. Breadcrumbs migrate into the sheets, where they will keep you company all night. You manage a few careful spoonfuls, tell yourself it is doing you good, and hand the tray back only slightly emptier than it arrived, to the mild disappointment of a nurse, who would very much like you to clean your plate. And yet, hunger is a persuasive teacher. By the third day, that dishwater broth begins to look almost appealing. The gelatin becomes a genuine event, the highlight of a long, flat afternoon. You find yourself listening for the trolley, not with dread now, but with something dangerously close to anticipation. Because when your world has shrunk to a single bed and a single ceiling, even a bland meal is a happening, a break in the endless sameness. The food has not improved. Your standards have simply come down to meet it, so you eat what you can, keep your quiet opinions to yourself, and let the beige do its gentle work. But there is one thing on your bedside table that everyone here agrees is good for you, and it will astonish your modern lungs. Let us talk about the cigarettes. Now brace yourself, because you are allowed to smoke in bed, and so is nearly everyone else. In this era, the cigarette is not just permitted in the hospital, it is practically prescribed. Ashtrays sit on bedside tables like little welcome gifts. Patients puff away between coughing fits, visitors light up beside them, and the doctor himself may pause his rounds to enjoy one, sometimes in a print advertisement where he cheerfully recommends a particular brand for your throat. The whole ward hangs in a soft blue haze, and nobody finds this the least bit odd. Look around and you will see it everywhere. The man in the next bed lights up the moment breakfast is cleared, drawing deeply as though the smoke itself were medicine. A nurse empties his ashtray with the same brisk efficiency she brings to plumping his pillow. Cigarettes are handed out to soothe the nerves of the anxious, offered to visitors as courtesy, and enjoyed by staff on their brief and precious breaks. The little glowing points drift across the darkened ward at night like patient fireflies. In this building devoted to health, tobacco is treated as one of life's ordinary comforts, no more remarkable than a cup of tea. The culture around it runs deep. This is an age when the cigarette is woven into everything, into films and offices and dinner tables and doctors' waiting rooms. Advertisements feature men in white coats endorsing their preferred brand. assuring the public that it is gentle, that it soothes the throat, that discerning physicians choose it themselves. The message is everywhere and it is trusted, because doctors are trusted, and if the doctor is smoking one himself while he examines you, what possible harm could there be? The whole society is wrapped in the same friendly blue haze, and the hospital simply matches the world outside its doors. For you, the patient, this presents a strange scene. You lie in a bed, recovering from whatever brought you here, breathing air you could very nearly slice and serve. The smoke gathers near the high ceiling, softening the light, settling into the curtains and the linen and quite possibly your recovering lungs. If you're a smoker yourself, you find this arrangement rather agreeable, reaching for the ashtray between the nurse's rounds. If you're not, you learn to breathe shallowly and accept that the air in here belongs to everyone, and everyone has decided to fill it with tobacco. The tragedy hiding in all of it is that the truth is only just beginning to surface. In these very years, researchers are quietly assembling the evidence that will eventually change everything, linking the beloved cigarette to the very diseases these wards are full of. The findings are coming, but they have not yet won the room. The habit is far too comfortable, far too woven into daily life, far too profitable and familiar to be dislodged by a few worried scientists. And so the haze lingers, and the ashtrays stay, and the doctor keeps recommending his brand. Later generations will find this almost impossible to believe, that a place built to heal the sick once encouraged the very thing making so many of them sick in the first place. But that is the strange, smoke-wreathed truth of the era. You're welcome to light up, the doctor approves, and the whole ward agrees it does a body good, right up until the moment history proves otherwise. Now once the smoke clears, let us look at what is actually in the little cups they keep bringing you, because the age of the miracle drug has arrived. Let us visit the pharmacy of wonders. Let us talk about the medicine, because the 1950s are drunk on their own success. Penicillin has arrived, the wonder drug that suddenly cures things that used to kill people, and everyone is understandably delighted. The problem is that delight tips very quickly into enthusiasm, and antibiotics start getting handed out for absolutely everything, including a sniffle, a bad mood, and possibly a squeaky door. Nobody yet worries about using too much, because the idea that these miracle drugs could ever stop working sounds like science fiction. You have to understand what a genuine miracle this seemed. Only a short while ago, a simple infection could carry a healthy person off in a matter of days. A scratch could turn deadly. A childhood illness could empty a household. Then came the antibiotics, and suddenly diseases that had terrified families for centuries could be beaten back with a course of injections. Doctors who had spent their careers watching patients slip away from infections they could not touch, now held the cure in their hands. It felt like magic, and in a way it was, and the joy of it swept through medicine like sunrise after a very long night. But triumph has a way of tipping into excess. If the wonder drug cures the desperately ill, the reasoning went, surely it can help the mildly unwell too, and the merely uncomfortable, and the person who simply wants to be sure. So the antibiotics began to flow freely, prescribed for coughs and colds they could do nothing about, for aches and sniffles and vague complaints, dispensed with the generous confidence of people who believe they have found an answer to everything. Why hold back a miracle? Why not share it around? The little vials and cups multiplied, and the ward hummed with the quiet certainty that modern medicine had finally won. For you, this means your paper cup of pills or your scheduled injection is likely to include one of these marvels, whether or not your particular trouble is the sort it can actually fix. You take it gratefully, because everyone speaks of these drugs in tones of reverence, and because in the mind of the era, more medicine simply means better care. The neighbour in the next bed gets his dose. The patient across the aisle gets hers. The whole ward is being liberally dosed with the wonders of the age, and the mood is one of pure, uncomplicated optimism. And here is where the shadow falls, the one nobody in the room can see yet. Use this freely, this carelessly. These miracle drugs are quietly teaching the very germs they fight how to survive them. Every unnecessary dose gives the hardiest bacteria a chance to learn, to adapt, to shrug off the assault and pass that resistance on. The seeds of a future problem, an enormous one, are being planted right here in these hopeful wards in the belief that the miracle could never run out. The bill for all this enthusiasm will come due decades from now, long after everyone in this room has moved on. But that is tomorrow's trouble, and this is a time of celebration. For now, the wonder drug works. Lives are being saved that would have been lost, and medicine has every reason to feel proud of itself. You swallow your dose and join the general optimism, blissfully unaware that generosity with a miracle can carry a hidden cost. The pharmacy has more than one marvel to offer, though, and the next two arrive on a gentle daily schedule designed to put you down at night and lift you up by morning. Let us talk about the pep pills and the sleeping pills. Here is a delightful little routine you will get used to. In the evening, a nurse brings a small paper cup holding a barbiturate to help you sleep, because rest is sacred and the ward is loud enough to wake the dead. In the morning, you may be offered something to perk you right back up, an amphetamine handed out as casually as a mint. Up in the morning, down at night, up again tomorrow, a gentle chemical seesaw that the medicine of the era considers perfectly sensible. The evening ritual comes first. As the ward settles and the lights begin to dim, the nurse makes her rounds with a little tray of paper cups, and in yours sits a capsule promising a night of untroubled sleep. You're grateful for it, truly, because the open ward is a symphony of snores, coughs, footsteps, and the rattle of distant trolleys, and drifting off unaided in such a place would be a heroic feat. So you swallow the pill, sink into the pillow, and feel a heavy, welcome fog roll in and switch off the noise. Sleep in here is not something you earn. It is something you are issued. Then comes the morning, and with it, for many patients, a gentle chemical nudge in the opposite direction. That heavy fog does not always lift on its own, and a groggy patient is a gloomy patient, so the era has an answer for that too. A little something to sharpen you up, to chase away the haze, to get you bright-eyed and cheerful for the doctor's rounds. It is handed over with the same easy confidence as everything else. No fuss, no warnings, just a small pill to help you meet the day. Down at night, up in the morning, the pendulum swinging on schedule. Nobody in the ward finds this the least bit strange, because the whole society treats these substances with a remarkable casualness. Pills to sleep and pills to wake are woven into ordinary life far beyond the hospital, prescribed generously to the busy, the tired, the tense, and the merely restless. The notion that they might grip a person, that the body might come to lean on them, that stopping could be its own kind of trouble, is a distant and rather unwelcome idea that the era prefers not to dwell on. These are helpful modern conveniences, and helpful modern conveniences are to be enjoyed, not fretted over. So you settle into the rhythm, because resisting it would be swimming against the whole current of the place. The evening capsule becomes something you look forward to, your reliable ticket out of the noisy ward and into oblivion. The morning pick-me-up becomes the thing that makes you feel human again. Within a few days, the seesaw feels almost natural, your moods and your energy handed to you in little paper cups on a schedule set by someone else. Your own body quietly outsourced to the pharmacy. The reckoning, as with so much in this building, waits patiently in the future. The understanding of just how habit-forming these pills can be, of the quiet dependence they can breed, is still catching up to the enthusiasm for handing them out. For now, they are simply part of good care, dispensed with a smile and swallowed without a second thought, the gentle machinery that runs your days and your nights while you lie there and let it. Chemically balanced and thoroughly medicated, you're now ready for the hospital's other great enthusiasm, the one that involves a large humming machine and a generous invisible beam. Let us talk about the X-ray. Time for some pictures of your insides, and the hospital could not be more excited about it. The 1950s are wildly, joyfully in love with the X-ray, and the machine gets pointed at nearly everyone for nearly everything, often more than once, and rarely with much thought about the total dose. Protective shielding is minimal, the exposures are long by modern standards, and in this era you can even wander into a shoe shop and stick your feet into a glowing box to see your own bones for fun. The machine itself is a serious and impressive contraption, all metal arms and heavy housing, wheeled into position over the part of you in question with the ceremony it deserves. You're told to hold very still, to hold your breath, to not so much as twitch, while the thing hums and clicks and does its invisible work. A moment later, somewhere in a back room, a ghostly grey image of your own skeleton will appear on a plate, your bones laid bare like a secret. It is genuinely marvellous, a window straight through the flesh, and you can understand entirely why the era fell so hard for it. And fall it did. The X-ray gets aimed at nearly every complaint that walks through the door, and often several times over, because if one picture is useful, then surely more pictures are more useful. Broken bones, sore chests, aching bellies, uncertain diagnoses, all of it earns a trip beneath the beam. Follow-up images are taken freely to check on progress. The machine works hard, day in and day out, and each patient collects exposure after exposure with nobody keeping much of a running total, because the running total is not yet thought to matter. The casualness extends well beyond the hospital walls, and this is where the era truly shows itself. Out in the ordinary world, you can walk into a shoe shop, slide your feet into a special glowing box, and peer down at the bones of your own toes wiggling inside your new shoes, purely for the novelty and the fun of it. Children love it. Salesmen use it to prove a good fit. Nobody thinks twice, because radiation is regarded as a clever and harmless bit of modern wizardry, a tool with all upside and no cost, to be enjoyed as freely as electric light. The shielding tells the whole story. In this era, the heavy protective aprons and careful distances and strict dose limits of later medicine are minimal or absent. The beam is stronger and lingers longer than it will in years to come, and the technician may stand closer than any modern colleague would dream of. The invisible nature of it all makes it easy to ignore. You cannot see radiation, cannot feel it, cannot smell it, and so it is very easy to believe it simply is not there, doing anything at all. Out of sight, out of mind, and pointed at your chest for the third time this week. None of which is to say the X-ray is anything less than a genuine triumph of medicine, because it is, and it will save and improve countless lives once its power is properly respected. The problem is only the era's boundless and unguarded enthusiasm, the sense that a good thing could never carry a hidden price. That respect, that caution, that careful counting of every exposure all lies ahead. For now, the beam is generous, the mood is delighted, and you hold your breath and let it do its ghostly work. But the era's love affair with radiation does not stop at taking pictures. It also believes the invisible beam can heal you, and sometimes it is right. Let us step into the age of the radioactive cure, and it is not just pictures. In this era, radiation itself is a treatment aimed at tumours and ailments with a confidence that is equal parts impressive and unsettling. Radioactive iodine is given to calm an overactive thyroid. Beams are directed at growths in the hope of shrinking them. Some of this is real, careful medicine that saves lives and forms the backbone of cancer care to this day. Some of it, out in the wider world, curdles into quackery, with dubious tonics and gadgets promising that a little radioactivity will cure whatever ails you. Inside the hospital, the serious work is genuinely remarkable. Doctors have discovered that the same invisible energy that photographs your bones can also be turned against disease, focused onto a tumour to weaken and shrink it. A patient with an overactive thyroid may be given a carefully measured dose of radioactive iodine, which travels straight to the gland and quiets it down, a piece of cleverness that seems almost like science fiction. These are real advances, the ancestors of treatments that will one day help enormous numbers of people, delivered by careful hands who understand they're working with something powerful. You lie beneath the apparatus and place your trust entirely in the people operating it, because trust is the only tool you have. They position you just so, tell you to stay still and step behind their shielding to send the beam into you. You feel nothing at all, which is the strangest part, this profound invisible force passing through you without so much as a whisper. The doctors speak of it with the same confidence they bring to everything, and their confidence is largely earned, because in skilled hands and proper doses this is legitimate, life-saving work. The trouble lies at the edges, in the gap between the careful science and the era's giddy faith in all things radioactive. Beyond the hospital walls, that faith has curdled into something far less respectable. The wider world of the age has been swept up in a fascination with radioactivity, and clever sellers have rushed to cash in, peddling tonics and creams and strange little gadgets that promise a healthful dose of radiation for whatever troubles you. Feeling tired, aches, and pains. A splash of the miraculous invisible energy will surely set you right. It is nonsense, and sometimes dangerous nonsense, dressed up in the shining language of modern science. The line between the two, between the careful medicine and the reckless quackery, is blurrier than it should be, because the whole era shares a single blind spot. Radiation is understood to be powerful, but the full weight of its dangers, the way it can harm as readily as it heals when handled carelessly, is not yet burned into the common mind. The caution that later generations will insist upon, the strict limits and the deep respect for the risks, simply does not exist yet in full, and so the good and the foolish travel side by side, both wrapped in the same bright confidence. You, meanwhile, receive the genuine article, the real treatment from real doctors, and you are fortunate for it, because it may well be doing you profound good. You cannot see it, cannot feel it, cannot judge it for yourself, and so you do what patients of this era always do. You lie still, you trust completely, and you let the invisible beam get on with its work, hoping the hands that aim it know exactly what they are doing. If your week has taken a more serious turn, though, the beam may not be enough, and you may find yourself wheeled toward a very different room. Let us walk together into the operating theatre. If your week takes a surgical turn, let us walk you toward the operating theatre. And yes, it is sometimes literally a theatre, ringed with seats so students can lean in and watch. You are wheeled down a corridor on a hard trolley, ceiling lights sliding past overhead like a strange dream, and delivered into a bright tiled room that smells of soap and something sharper underneath. The surgeon scrubs, though perhaps not for as long as he should, and the instruments gleam on their tray. The journey there is its own quiet ordeal. You're lifted onto a narrow trolley and rolled out of the familiar ward and into the unknown, staring up at a parade of ceiling lights that slide past one after another, each one a small sun swimming by. The corridors turn, doors swing, voices murmur about you rather than to you. By the time you arrive at the theatre, you have been thoroughly reminded that you're now cargo, delivered where the schedule requires, with about as much say in the matter as a parcel. The room itself is bright to the point of severity, all hard tile and polished metal, lit so fiercely that shadows have nowhere to hide. The air carries the clean bite of soap and disinfectant, and underneath it, fainter and less reassuring, the sharper smell of the work that happens here. On a tray beside the table, the instruments lie arranged in gleaming rows, catching the light, waiting. Masked figures move about the space with practiced calm, and you realize you cannot tell any of them apart. A room full of eyes above cloth, all of them turned briefly toward you. And then there is the theatre in the fullest sense, because in this era the room may genuinely be built like one, with tiered seats rising round the table so that students and junior doctors can lean in and observe. Surgery is teaching as well as healing, and a good operation draws an audience of the eager and the learning, peering down at the table where you lie. You are, for the length of the procedure, the featured performance, the case of the day, studied and discussed by a gallery of people whose names you will never know. It is a strange sort of fame, earned by lying very still and being unwell. The surgeon presides over all of it, scrubbing his hands and forearms at a basin before pulling on his gloves, a ritual of cleanliness that is real and important, and by the standards that will come later, perhaps not quite thorough enough. Sterile technique has travelled a long way from the horrors of earlier centuries, and the people in this room genuinely understand that cleanliness saves lives. But it has not yet reached its final, obsessive perfection. An infection remains a real and patient danger, lurking at the edges of even the most careful procedure, ready to turn a successful operation into a difficult recovery. Still, there is deep skill at work here, and real courage on both sides of the table. The surgeon has trained for years and carries the confidence of hard-won experience. The team around him moves in practice coordination, anticipating, assisting, keeping the delicate machinery of the operation running. Whatever the limits of the era, these are people bending all their talent toward putting you back together, and that is no small thing to place your faith in. You, of course, will witness almost none of it, which is entirely for the best. You simply have to lie back on that hard, bright table, breathe, and surrender yourself completely to a room full of masked strangers and the era's steady, imperfect best. But before any of that can begin, they must first send you somewhere far away. Let us talk about how they put you under. Before the surgery comes the part where they put you to sleep, and it is quite an event. Anesthesia in this era is real progress and also faintly terrifying. A mask may be lowered over your face, and the sweet choking smell of ether or something like it fills your world as a voice tells you to count backward from 100. You rarely reach 90. The dosing is more art than science, guided by the anaesthetist's eye and experience rather than the precise monitors of later decades. It begins gently enough. A calm figure appears at the head of the table, murmuring reassurances, and lowers a mask toward your face with the unhurried manner of someone who has done this 1,000 times. You are told to breathe normally, to relax, to count slowly backward, and you obey, because obeying is what you do in here. Then comes the smell, sweet and heavy and unmistakable, filling your nose and your throat and your whole shrinking world, and you understand with sudden clarity that this is really happening. The descent is peculiar and swift. You count 100, 99, 98, and somewhere around 90 the numbers begin to slide away from you, growing thick and distant, the room softening at its edges. The bright lights blur, the voices stretch and warp. There is a moment of floating strangeness, not quite sleep and not quite waking, and then nothing at all, a clean black gap in your existence into which the entire operation will vanish without leaving so much as a memory. It is a small death and a resurrection, scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The person guiding you through it is working with far more skill than equipment. The dosing of anesthesia in this era leans heavily on the anesthetist's trained eye, on watching your breathing and your colour and the flutter of your eyelids, on a feel for the work built through long experience rather than the precise electronic monitors that later decades will bring. Too little, and you might stir before you should. Too much, and the danger runs the other way. Holding a patient in that narrow, safe middle, hour after hour by observation and instinct, is a genuine art, and the people who practice it are more skilled than the primitive tools around them might suggest. Coming back is its own strange journey. You surface slowly from the black, dragged up through layers of heavy fog, your thoughts thick and your tongue thicker. The room swims into focus in pieces. Your throat feels scraped and raw, your stomach uncertain and rebellious, your grip on the last several hours completely gone. You're told the operation went well and you nod, or think you nod, and slide back under for a while before trying again. The nausea and grogginess of the ether haze can linger for a long, miserable stretch, a rough toll paid for the mercy of feeling nothing during the main event. And it is a mercy, make no mistake, a genuine wonder of the age. Not so very long ago, surgery meant being held down and enduring every terrible moment fully awake, and the arrival of reliable anesthesia transformed the operating room from a chamber of horrors into a place of real hope. That you can be sent painlessly away and returned in one piece is a triumph worth being grateful for, even through the fog and the sore throat and the churning stomach. It works far more often than it fails, which is exactly the kind of reassurance that is not very reassuring at all. So you count backward, you slip into the dark, and you trust the calm figure at your head to bring you safely back. When you do return, blinking and groggy, you will find that the hard part is only beginning, because now comes the recovery. Let us talk about the long weeks that follow. So the operation is over, and now comes the truly punishing part, the recovery, which is measured not in days but in weeks. Remember the great commandment of bed rest. It comes for you now with full force. You will lie flat, immobile, tended and turned, for a stretch of time that a modern patient would find unimaginable, because the medicine of this era believes deeply that healing requires total stillness. There is no encouragement to get up and walk the halls the very next morning, no brisk physical therapist urging you toward the door. You wake from the surgery into a world that has shrunk to the dimensions of your bed, and there it will stay for a very long while. The instruction is simple and absolute. Do not move. Do not sit up without permission. Do not so much as think about placing a foot upon the floor. Your body has been operated upon, and the wisdom of the age holds that the kindest, safest thing you can now do is nothing whatsoever, for days that stretch into weeks. So you settle in, flat on your back, and prepare to heal by the ancient and revered method of lying still and waiting. The days blur into one another with alarming ease. Morning arrives, marked by the trolley and the thermometer. The long middle of the day yawns open, empty and endless, filled with the ceiling, the clock, and the murmur of the ward. Evening comes with its supper and its sleeping pill, and then another morning, indistinguishable from the last. You lose track of which day it is. You measure time in meals and rounds and the slow crawl of light across the wall. Your world has become very small and very slow, and there is nothing to do but endure it. The stillness itself is a kind of work, and a strangely exhausting one. You would think doing nothing would be restful, but the body rebels against enforced idleness. Your legs ache to move, your back protests. A restlessness builds inside you with nowhere to go, trapped beneath the covers by doctor's orders and the whole weight of the era's certainty. You count the tiles overhead until you know them by heart. You study the water stains and the light fixture with the intensity of a scholar. Boredom becomes its own affliction, one the ward has no pill for. There is no cheerful therapist here to interrupt the tedium, no encouraging voice urging you onto your feet, no gentle insistence that a short walk might do you good. That entire philosophy, the one that will eventually have patients up and moving within a day of surgery, lies far in the future. Here, movement is the enemy of healing, and so you're kept horizontal with the best of intentions, praised for your stillness, tended in your bed, and left to mend at the slow pace the era insists upon. The nurses do their patient best to make the endless days bearable. They turn you, adjust your pillows, bring your meals, and offer a kind word when they can spare one. But there is only so much they can do against the sheer grinding sameness of weeks spent flat on your back, watching the world happen to other people from the fixed vantage of your bed. Recovery in this era is not a brisk return to life. It is long, still, patient waiting, an act of endurance measured in ceilings counted and clocks watched. And here is the cruel twist that lies waiting for anyone who holds too still for too long, a danger born from the very stillness meant to heal you. Let us talk about what happens to a body that never gets to move. Here is the cruel twist of all that heroic resting. Lie in one position long enough and your own body begins to protest, and the ward is quietly at war with the bedsore. Pressure builds where skin meets mattress, on the heels, the hips, the shoulders, and without frequent turning, the skin gives way. Nurses do their best, rolling patients on a schedule, propping cushions, rubbing at tender spots, but there are many beds and few hands. The very treatment meant to heal you, that sacred stillness, becomes a slow danger of its own. The mechanics of it are simple and merciless. Your body was never designed to rest its full weight on the same few points for hours and days on end. Where bone presses skin against the mattress, at the heels, the base of the spine, the hips, the shoulder blades, the flow of blood is squeezed down to a trickle. Starved of circulation, the skin in those spots grows angry, then raw, then breaks down entirely if nothing changes. What began as a faint red patch can deepen into a genuine wound. And a wound, in a ward where infection already lurks, is the last thing anyone wants. The nurses understand this danger intimately, and they wage a constant, tiring campaign against it. On a schedule, they come to turn you, easing you gently from your back onto your side, then later onto the other side, redistributing the pressure so that no single spot bears the burden too long. They tuck cushions and rolled cloth beneath you to ease the load on the worst points. They rub at the tender places to coax the blood back, and they inspect your skin with practiced eyes, hunting for the first faint warning of trouble. It is diligent, unglamorous work, and it never stops. But there are always more beds than hands, and the campaign is uphill. A single nurse may be responsible for a whole row of patients, each one needing turning, each one needing watching, each one competing for the same limited store of time and attention. Do the arithmetic, and it becomes clear that no matter how devoted the staff, someone may go a little too long between turns. Some tender patch may go a moment too long unwatched. The system depends on tireless vigilance, and the people providing it are only human, stretched thin across a demanding ward. The deep irony is impossible to miss, and it sits at the very heart of this era's approach to care. The stillness prescribed to heal you, the sacred bed rest praised by every doctor and enforced by every rule, is the exact thing that breeds this new affliction. The cure and the harm walk hand in hand down the same tidy ward, arm in arm, the one quietly creating the conditions for the other. You're ordered to lie still to get well, and lying still threatens to make you worse, and everyone is doing precisely what the age believes is right. For you, all of this means learning to welcome the discomfort of being moved. When the nurse comes to turn you, shifting your aching body onto a fresh side, you feel the brief relief of pressure lifting from a spot that had begun to burn. You shift when you are allowed, grateful for every small change of position, and you come to understand a strange truth that the era is only beginning to grasp. Lying perfectly still, it turns out, is far more difficult and far more dangerous than it ever sounds, and staying whole through a long recovery is its own quiet battle. All of this brings us to a question that hangs over the entire ward, one the era cares about enormously in some ways and strangely little in others. Let us talk about keeping things clean. Let us talk about cleanliness, which the hospital cares about enormously in some ways and strangely little in others. The floors are mopped to a shine, the sheets are boiled, the surfaces gleam, and yet the humble act of thoroughly washing hands between patients is not yet the ironclad ritual it will become. A doctor may move from one bed to the next with the same hands and the same brisk confidence. The reused needle makes its rounds. Infection theory is understood on paper but not yet burned into every reflex. The visible cleanliness is genuinely impressive, and the ward takes deep pride in it. Floors are scrubbed and polished until they shine like still water. Linen is boiled within an inch of its life and folded into crisp perfection. Surfaces are wiped, bedpans are scoured, and the whole place gleams with the confident sparkle of an institution that believes cleanliness is next to godliness. To your eye, lying there in your bed, the ward looks spotless, and that spotlessness is meant to reassure you, and to a point it does. Everything you can see has been made to shine. But cleanliness, it turns out, is not only what you can see. The invisible traffic of germs passing from hand to patient to hand again is a subtler enemy, and the era is still learning to fight it with the fierce consistency that later decades will demand. The doctor completes his examination of the man in the next bed, thinks for a moment, and moves directly to you, the same hands reaching out, unwashed in the gap between. It is not carelessness exactly, not by the standards of the day. It is simply that the habit of scrubbing between every single patient has not yet hardened into unbreakable law. The equipment tells the same story. The reused syringe travels the row of beds. The thermometer makes its shared rounds. Instruments are cleaned, yes, and boiled and treated with real care, but the deep, obsessive, single-use caution of the future has not arrived. Germ theory itself is well understood by now, taught in every medical school, accepted by every physician. The gap is not in the knowledge, the gap is in the reflex, in the 1,000 tiny automatic habits that turn knowledge into consistent daily practice, and those habits are still forming. So infection moves through the ward more freely than anyone would wish, drifting in the space between what everyone knows and what everyone actually does in the rush of a busy day. A wound that should heal cleanly may sour. A patient admitted for one trouble may pick up another in the very bed meant to cure the first. It happens quietly, without anyone doing anything they consider wrong, in a building that genuinely believes itself to be clean, and by its own visible standards very much is. The shine on the floor and the safety of the patient are not always quite the same thing. The nurses and doctors here are not villains in this, and it is worth saying plainly. They work hard, they clean diligently, they follow the best practice their era has settled upon, and they save a great many lives in the doing. The failing is the era's, not theirs, a matter of understanding that has not yet fully caught up to itself. In the years ahead, hand-washing between every patient will become a near sacred rite, and the reused needle will vanish into history, and infection rates will fall accordingly. But that reckoning is still to come. For now, you lie in your gleaming ward, surrounded by shine and served by devoted hands, trusting a cleanliness that is real to the eye and imperfect beneath it. And should you need something given back to your body that it has lost, there is another marvel waiting, one that saves lives and carries its own hidden risk. Let us talk about the blood in the bag. If you need blood, the good news is that transfusion is now a genuine and life-saving science, with blood types matched and stored and ready. The less good news is that the era does not yet have the tools to screen that blood for everything hiding inside it. Certain infections, hepatitis chief among them, can ride along in the bag entirely unnoticed, and there is no reliable test standing guard. So the transfusion may save your life today and hand you a quiet, invisible problem for later, a trade nobody in the room knows they are making. Consider first how far this has come, because it truly is a marvel. The great puzzle of blood, the reason earlier attempts so often ended in disaster, has been solved. Doctors now understand that blood comes in types, that the wrong type given to the wrong person is deadly, and that the right match can be a gift of life. Blood can be collected, stored and kept ready, drawn from generous donors and held against the moment a patient needs it. When your body has lost too much, whether to surgery or accident or illness, a bag of matched blood can be run into your veins and pull you back from the edge. It is one of the quiet triumphs of modern medicine. You watch it happen from your bed, the dark red bag hung above you, the line snaking down, the slow, steady drip that carries a stranger's blood into your own body. There is something almost solemn in it, this borrowed life flowing into you, and you feel only gratitude, because gratitude is the natural response to being saved. The nurse checks the flow, notes it on your chart and moves on, and you lie there letting the transfusion do its careful work, restoring what you had lost. But here is the shadow that no one in the room can see, because the tools to see it do not yet exist. That donated blood, matched so carefully for type, cannot yet be fully screened for the smaller dangers it might carry. Certain infections can hide within it, silent and invisible, and hepatitis in particular can ride along undetected, passed from a donor who never knew they carried it to a patient who never knew to fear it. There is no reliable test standing at the door to catch it, no way to hold the bag up to the light and know it is entirely safe. And so, a quiet and unintended trade is made. The transfusion that saves your life today may, in a fraction of cases, leave behind a problem that surfaces only later, a slow, invisible passenger that arrived with the very gift that rescued you. Nobody chose this. The donor gave in good faith. The doctors acted to save you. The bargain was struck without anyone at the bedside even knowing a bargain was on the table, because the knowledge and the tools to reveal it are still years away from arriving. It is another of this era's honest limits, the kind that later medicine will close with better tests and greater caution, screening every unit of blood so thoroughly that the hidden passengers can no longer slip through. That future is coming. It has simply not arrived in this ward, on this day, above this bed. For now, the transfusion is a genuine rescue offered, with the best that the age can provide, and you receive it with a full and grateful heart, watching the dark red drip and trusting as ever in hands doing their honest best. From the general wards, let us now move to a place where new life comes into the world, though not in the gentle way you might imagine. Let us step carefully into the maternity ward. let us step into the maternity ward, where bringing new life into the world has been turned into a strangely lonely and heavily managed ordeal. In this era, a labouring mother is often given a combination of drugs meant to erase her memory of the pain, a practice they call twilight sleep, which leaves her groggy, disoriented, and sometimes restrained for her own safety in a way that is deeply distressing. The father is not welcome in the room. He is banished to a waiting area to pace and worry, kept far from the birth of his own child. The intention behind it began as a kind of mercy. Childbirth had always been an ordeal of pain and fear, and medicine sincerely wished to spare women the worst of it. Twilight sleep was offered as that relief, a combination of drugs that dulled the experience and, crucially, wiped away the memory of it afterward, so that a mother might wake with her child and recall little of the difficulty that came before. On paper, it sounded like a gift, the removal of suffering from one of life's hardest passages, and many women asked for it, hoping to be spared. The reality inside the room was harder and stranger than the promise. The drugs did not truly end the pain so much as remove the memory of it, which meant a labouring woman might still suffer while unable to remember or control herself, drifting in a disoriented haze, frightened and unmoored. In that confused state, some women thrashed or struggled, and so, in a detail that later generations would find deeply troubling, they were sometimes restrained for their own protection, labouring alone in a fog they could neither understand nor recall. It was isolation of the most profound kind, present for the birth of your own child and yet absent from it. And she was, in every meaningful sense, alone. The father had no place in that room. He was sent to wait elsewhere, to pace a corridor or a waiting area, cut off entirely from the birth of his child, permitted to meet the baby only once everything was over and everyone had been made tidy. The warm image we now hold, of a partner at the bedside holding a hand and sharing the moment, simply did not exist here. Birth was a medical procedure managed by staff, and the family waited outside its doors. Afterward came the long enforced stillness. The same bed rest that ruled the rest of the hospital applied now to new mothers, who were kept flat and recovering for many days when they might have wished to rise and hold and tend their infants. The baby was often kept apart in the nursery and brought to the mother on a schedule, the two of them separated by the routines of the ward. It was care, and it was meant kindly, but it held mother and child at a careful institutional distance during the very hours when closeness matters most. For countless women, this was the shape of one of the most significant days of their lives, and many carried the disorientation and loneliness of it quietly for years afterward. It is not a subject for lightness. These were mothers who wanted only to bring their children safely into the world, served by a system that believed it was helping them, and in many ways failed to see what it was taking away. The gentler, more humane approach to birth, with partners present and mothers awake and in control, lay in a future still being fought for. And once the child had arrived, the smallest and most fragile among them faced dangers the staff loved them far too much to have ever intended. Let us look gently into the nursery. Down the hall lies the nursery, rows of newborns behind glass, and here the tone must soften, because this is where good intentions led somewhere heartbreaking. Premature infants, the smallest and most fragile patients in the building, are placed in incubators and given extra oxygen to help them breathe and survive. For a time, the doctors believe they are doing everything right. Only later does the medical world come to understand that too much oxygen was quietly damaging the eyes of some of these tiny babies, leaving a generation of children with lasting harm to their sight. Picture the nursery itself, a warm and hopeful place on its surface, rows of tiny newborns behind a wide pane of glass, tended by nurses who have devoted themselves to the care of the very smallest. For the infants born too soon, too early and too frail to manage the world on their own, the incubator is a genuine lifeline, a warm enclosed cradle that shelters them and helps them breathe while their tiny bodies work to catch up. Into these incubators, the staff introduced extra oxygen, reasoning, sensibly enough, that a struggling infant needed all the help drawing breath that could be given. For a time, it seemed to be working, and the doctors had every reason to believe they had found a way to save babies who might otherwise have been lost. More of these fragile infants survived. The oxygen appeared to be doing exactly what everyone hoped, supporting the smallest patients through their most dangerous early days, and the practice spread on the strength of that hope. There was no reason in the moment to suspect that the very thing sustaining these children might be harming them in a way no one could see. The harm revealed itself only slowly, and it was a quiet tragedy. In time it became clear that the generous levels of oxygen, the very intervention meant to save these babies, were injuring their developing eyes, and that a number of the children who survived their early days went on to suffer permanent damage to their sight. A generation of infants was affected before the connection was understood and the practice corrected. It was one of the hardest lessons medicine can learn, the discovery that a treatment given in love and hope had carried a devastating and invisible cost. What matters, in remembering it, is that no one meant for this to happen. The doctors and nurses who cared for these infants fought for their lives with everything they had, sitting up through long nights, willing the smallest and weakest to grow strong. They acted on the best understanding available to them, and that understanding was simply, tragically incomplete. The failing was not one of cruelty or neglect. It was the failing of a medicine still learning, doing its sincere best and only later coming to see the price of what it had done. It stands as one of the most solemn reminders the hospital of this era has to offer. Even care given with the deepest devotion, by hands that loved their patients fiercely, can carry a harm that no one yet knows how to recognize. Medicine learned some of its hardest lessons far too late, and always at a cost borne by the very people it was trying to help. The children affected, and the families who loved them, deserve to be remembered with honesty and with tenderness, never as a footnote and never with anything but care. From the youngest patients, let us turn to a ward that struck fear into every family of the era, and to one of the most haunting machines in all of medicine. Let us enter the polio ward. Now we come to the polio ward, and the mood on the whole floor changes the moment you enter. This is the 1950s, and polio is the terror stalking every summer, striking children without warning, and the ward is home to one of the most haunting machines in medical history, the iron lung. It is a long metal cylinder that encloses a patient up to the neck, breathing for them with a steady rhythmic push and pull when their own muscles no longer can. To understand the weight of this ward, you must understand the fear that fills the era outside it. Polio arrives with the warm weather, and every summer parents watch their children with a dread that never fully lifts. It strikes without warning and without mercy, and it seems to fall hardest upon the young. A child healthy and running one week may be gravely ill the next, and there is no cure to offer, no reliable way to stop it, only the desperate hope that it will pass lightly and the terror that it will not. Swimming pools empty, public gatherings are avoided, a whole society holds its breath through the summer months. For the children the disease strikes hardest, whose own breathing muscles fail them. The iron lung is the last line between life and death. It is a long-sealed cylinder of metal, and a patient lies within it, with only the head emerging, the body enclosed inside. The machine changes the pressure around the chest in a slow, steady rhythm, drawing air into lungs that can no longer draw it themselves and pushing it out again, breathing for the patient tirelessly, hour after hour, day after day. Its rhythmic mechanical sigh fills the ward, a sound that never stops, the sound of machines breathing for children. Inside the cylinder, a child sees the world through a small angled mirror mounted above, catching a reflected glimpse of the ward, the ceiling, the faces that lean in to speak to them. Weeks may pass this way, sometimes far longer than anyone wishes to imagine. To lie enclosed and still, breathing to the rhythm of a machine, watching life pass in a small tilted mirror, asks a courage almost beyond words, and the children of this ward summon it day after day with a bravery that would humble anyone who witnessed it. The nurses and doctors who work here carry their own quiet heroism. They tend these children with endless patience, speaking gently into the mirrors, adjusting the great machines, offering comfort and company through the long enclosed hours. They cannot cure what has happened, and they know it, and still they give everything they have to easing it, to keeping hope alive in a ward where hope is hard won. There is a tenderness in this place that sits alongside the fear, a fierce devotion to children caught in something no child should ever face, and over all of it hangs a single suspended hope, the hope of a vaccine, whispered about, worked toward, prayed for. The knowledge that somewhere researchers are racing to find a way to stop this disease before it can strike is the light at the edge of this darkened ward. That light is closer than anyone in the room quite dares to believe, a triumph that will one day empty rooms like this one forever. But on this day, in this ward, it has not yet arrived, and the machines breathe on, and the children endure, and the nurses keep their patient watch. From the polio ward, let us move to another place defined by the long, slow passage of time. A wing where recovery is measured not in days or weeks, but in seasons. Let us visit the tuberculosis ward. Let us visit the wing set aside for tuberculosis, where the treatment is measured not in days or weeks, but in seasons. In this era, before the newest drugs fully take hold, the answer to this stubborn disease is often rest, fresh air, good food, and time, an enormous amount of time. Patients may stay for months on end, sometimes more than a year, wheeled onto open porches to breathe the cold air that the medicine of the day believes will help their lungs mend. Tuberculosis is an old and patient enemy, a disease of the lungs that waste the body slowly and resist the quick fixes medicine would prefer. For generations, the only real treatment anyone could offer was to give the body every possible advantage and then wait. And so that is what the era does. The patient is prescribed rest, deep and prolonged, along with nourishing food to rebuild strength, and above all fresh air, great quantities of it, in the belief that clean cold air is itself a kind of medicine for ailing lungs. It is treatment by patience, healing by endurance. The rhythm of this wing is unlike anywhere else in the hospital. Beds may be wheeled out onto open porches and balconies so that patients can lie for hours in the open air, wrapped against the chill, breathing deeply of the cold that is thought to help them mend. There they rest, and rest, and rest some more, through morning and afternoon, through the changing weather, through days that fold into weeks and weeks that fold into months. Time moves differently here, slow to the pace of the disease itself, unhurried and vast. To be a patient here is to press pause on your own life for an extraordinary stretch of it. Months may pass, and for some, more than a year, spent away from home and work and family, living among others walking the same slow road. Friendships form in this suspended world, bonds between people who share the long waiting, who mark the seasons together from their beds and their porches. It is a strange and quiet existence, a long enforced stillness carved out of the middle of a person's years, asking a patience that is almost unimaginable to a world used to quicker cures. And yet change is stirring, even here. New medicines are beginning to arrive, drugs that can actually fight the disease itself rather than merely supporting the body while it struggles, and they carry the promise of shrinking these endless days into something far shorter and kinder. The long era of rest cures and open porches is beginning, slowly to draw toward its close, though it has not yet fully done so. For the patients in this wing on this day, the old ways still rule, and the treatment is still above all time. So they wait, these patients, with a quiet endurance that asks everything of them. They rest on their porches in the cold, clean air, they eat their nourishing meals, they mark the slow turning of the seasons, and they hold on to the hope of one day going home whole. It is a form of courage that makes no noise, the courage of simply enduring day after long day, trusting that patience and fresh air and time will eventually do what nothing faster yet can. There is a deep dignity in that long and quiet waiting. From a ward defined by patients, we now come to a part of the hospital that must be approached with the greatest care of all, where the understanding of the era was youngest and the potential for harm was gravest. Let us speak with restraint of the psychiatric ward. There is a part of the hospital, or a separate institution entirely, that we must approach with care, and that is the world of psychiatric treatment in this era. Here the understanding of the mind is still young, and the tools are blunt, sometimes tragically so. Overcrowded wards, harsh conditions, and treatments applied with far more confidence than knowledge define a system that too often failed the vulnerable people in its charge. Some procedures of the age, performed in the sincere belief that they helped, caused permanent and irreversible harm. The understanding of the mind in this era is, by later standards, painfully incomplete. The complex conditions that affect people's thoughts and moods and behaviour are only dimly understood. Their causes largely mysterious, their treatments crude and often mistaken. And yet the confidence of the age remained high, and treatments were applied to vulnerable people with a certainty that the knowledge behind them could not truly support. It was a field reaching far beyond its own understanding, and the people who paid the price were those least able to protect themselves. The conditions in which many of these patients lived were harsh. Wards and institutions were frequently overcrowded, understaffed and grim. Places where people could be confined for long stretches with little say in their own lives and little prospect of leaving. The dignity that every person deserves was too often absent, lost in the sheer strain of overburdened facilities and an era that did not yet know how to properly care for those in its charge. People who needed compassion and understanding sometimes found only confinement. Some of the treatments of the age are the hardest part of this history to face. Procedures were performed in the sincere belief that they would help, that we now understand cause profound and permanent harm, altering people irreversibly and stripping away parts of who they were. They were carried out by practitioners who genuinely thought they were doing good, which makes the outcome no less tragic. Countless patients underwent these interventions with little meaningful say in the matter, and lived with the consequences for the rest of their lives. This is not a subject for jokes, and there will be none here. The people who passed through these wards were human beings deserving of care and dignity, and too often they received neither, not through any single act of cruelty, but through the failures of an entire system that did not yet understand what it was doing. They were sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, people with inner lives as real and precious as anyone's, and the harm done to them was real and lasting. Their suffering deserves to be remembered plainly and honestly. It is a chapter that later reformers would look back upon with genuine sorrow, and one that would eventually drive enormous change, as understanding grew and as society came to insist upon compassion, consent, and dignity in the care of the mind. That change was hard-won and long overdue, built upon the recognition of everything that had gone wrong. But in this era, much of it still lay ahead, and the people in these wards waited in a world that had not yet learned how to help them. Remembering them honestly is the least that they are owed. Closely bound to this ward was a particular treatment that, in this era, was too often delivered without the safeguards that would later make it humane. Let us speak of it with the same care in the segment that follows. Closely tied to that ward is a treatment that, in this era, was often delivered without the safeguards we would now consider essential. Electroconvulsive therapy, the deliberate use of an electrical current to alter the brain, existed in the 1950s, but frequently without the anesthesia and muscle relaxants that later made it far safer and more humane. For the patients of this time, it could be a frightening and painful ordeal, applied broadly and sometimes without meaningful consent. The treatment itself involves passing an electrical current through the brain to produce a seizure, in the belief, which held some genuine truth, that this could relieve certain severe conditions of the mind. In careful modern hands, with the right protections in place, it would one day become a legitimate and valuable medical tool, capable of helping people in real and serious distress when other treatments had failed. The core idea was not without merit. The problem, in this era, lay in how it was carried out. For in the 1950s, the treatment was frequently delivered without the safeguards that would later become essential to it. The anesthesia that would one day allow a patient to sleep through the procedure was often absent. The muscle relaxants that would one day prevent the violent physical convulsions were often not used. This meant that patients could experience the treatment while awake and unprotected, an ordeal that was frightening and physically punishing in ways that later, safer versions of the procedure would entirely avoid. What could have been endured gently was instead endured harshly. It was also applied far more broadly than careful practice would allow, given to many patients for many conditions, with a confidence that outran the understanding behind it, and it was too often administered without the meaningful consent of the people receiving it, to patients who had little power to question or refuse what was being done to them. Vulnerable people, already confined and already struggling, underwent a difficult and frightening treatment with little say in the matter, and that absence of choice compounds the hardship of it. The gentler, more precise version of this treatment, the one hedged about with anesthesia and consent and careful limits, lay in the future, and it would represent an enormous improvement, transforming a crude and frightening ordeal into a controlled and humane medical procedure. That future would come, built upon the hard recognition of everything wrong with how the treatment had been used before. But it had not yet arrived in this era, and what existed in its place was cruder, more sweeping, and far harder to bear. The people who underwent it deserve to be remembered honestly, not as cases or footnotes, but as human beings who endured something painful and frightening, with little power to shape their own care. Their experience is part of the true history of this hospital, and it should be neither softened nor mocked, only remembered with the honesty and the respect it is owed. Medicine would learn from what happened to them, and would do better because of it, and that learning came at a cost they paid. Before we leave these wards, there is one more truth about the hospital of this era that must be spoken plainly and without flinching, a truth about who was allowed care at all. Let us face it directly, as your own long week draws quietly toward its end. Before we leave the wards, there is a hard truth that must be spoken plainly. In much of the country during the 1950s, Hospitals were segregated, and the colour of a person's skin could determine which building they entered, which ward they lay in, whether a bed was available to them at all, and sometimes whether they were turned away in an emergency to travel much farther for help. This was not a small footnote to the era of gleaming tile and starched caps. It was a profound and deliberate injustice. The reality was stark and enforced, in much of the country, and most rigidly in the South. Hospitals were divided by race as a matter of law and of custom. Black patients and other people of colour were directed to separate wards, or separate wings, or separate buildings entirely, and the facilities set aside for them were routinely inferior, underfunded and overcrowded, and short of the resources that flowed more freely elsewhere. Where a white patient found a bed, a black patient might find a corridor or a wait, or a door that would not open. The consequences of this could be a matter of life and death.